Every country on Earth is in debt. The United States owes $38 trillion. Japan owes $9 trillion. The entire planet owes $315 trillion. That is 3 times the size of the global economy. But here's the paradox that should terrify you. If everyone owes money, who exactly is owed? If every nation is in the red, where's the green? The answer isn't what you think. You've been taught that debt is a mistake, a sign of bad management, a political failure. Wrong. Debt is not a mistake. It is a product. It is a weapon system designed by 4 specific men across 3 centuries. Their goal was not to balance the books. Their goal was to build a machine that siphons wealth from the productive many and transfers it to the idle few. This is the story of the greatest heist in human history. It's not happening in a bank vault. It's happening in your wallet right now. Welcome to the infinite interest trap. To understand how they steal your future, we must go back to when the trap was first set. London, 1694. Before this date, debt had a fatal flaw. Kings borrowed money from merchants to fight wars. But if the king lost the war or simply ran out of money, he would default. He would just refuse to pay. For the bankers, lending to the government was a gamble. Debt was temporary. It was either repaid or it was erased by default. Enter William Paterson. He was a Scotsman with a vision that would reshape civilization. He approached King William III, who was desperate for money to fight France, with a revolutionary proposal. Paterson said, "Your Majesty, stop trying to pay back the loan." His idea was the perpetual loan. He organized a group of wealthy merchants to lend the government £1.2 million, a massive fortune. But the condition was unique. The government would never repay the principal. Instead, they would pay interest every year, forever. To manage this, they created a new institution, Bank of England. This changed the physics of money. Suddenly, the king didn't need to find gold to pay off his debts. He just needed to tax his citizens enough to pay the interest. And the bankers? They no longer wanted their money back. Why would they? They had secured a guaranteed stream of income, backed by the taxation power of the state, flowing eternally into their pockets. Paterson made debt permanent. It was no longer a hole to climb out of. It was a foundation to build upon. But a permanent debt in one country is still vulnerable. If that country collapses, the bankers lose everything. The system needed an upgrade. It needed Nathan Rothschild. By the early 1800s, the Rothschild family had established banking houses across Europe. But Nathan, operating out of London, saw the flaw in Paterson's system. If a government defaulted, the creditor stood alone. Rothschild's innovation was to industrialize sovereign debt. He created the international bond market. He didn't just lend his own money. He structured government loans into bonds and sold them to investors across the world. A British bond could be owned by a French duke, used as collateral by a German bank, and insured by an Austrian firm. He wove a web of debt so complex, so interconnected, that a default by one major nation would trigger a systemic collapse for everyone. He made the debt inescapable. We saw the power of this in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo. Rothschild's courier network brought him news of Napoleon's defeat before the government knew. He used this information to crash the bond market, then bought everything up at rock-bottom prices. When the official news arrived, he was the master of the British economy. This established the golden rule of the system. Control the information, control the debt, and you control the government. Governments were no longer customers. They were hostages. By the 20th century, the trap was global, but it had a physical limit: gold. Banks could only lend as much money as they had gold in their vaults. If the government wanted to borrow billions more, the banks simply ran out of cash. The system needed a way to print money out of thin air. Enter J.P. Morgan. In 1910, a secret meeting was held on Jekyll Island, Georgia. 6 men, representing a quarter of the world's wealth, gathered to draft the Federal Reserve Act. They knew the American public hated central banks, so they didn't call it a bank. They called it a system, the Federal Reserve. Passed in 1913, this was the final key to the cage. The Federal Reserve gave bankers the power to create money to buy government debt. Here is how the magic trick works. The government writes a piece of paper called a treasury bond. The Federal Reserve writes a piece of paper called a check. Money created from nothing. They swap papers. Suddenly, the government has money to spend. The Fed has an asset collecting interest, and the money supply expands. Before 1913, debt was limited by gold. After 1913, debt was limited only by the government's willingness to tax you. Morgan made the debt infinite. There was no longer any physical restraint on how much wealth could be siphoned from the future. So, how does this affect you? Why is your life getting harder while the stock market goes up? Because of the wealth transfer. Today, the U.S. national debt is $38 trillion. The government pays roughly $1 trillion a year just in interest. Where does that $1 trillion come from? It comes from you. It comes from your income tax. You go to work. You trade your time and labor for money. The government takes a percentage of that labor, but they don't use it to fix the roads or improve schools. That money is immediately transferred to the holders of the debt, the central banks, the hedge funds, the ultra-wealthy asset managers. It is a direct pipeline from the working class to the financial elite. And here's the cruelest part. They cannot stop. Our entire money supply is based on debt. Every dollar in your pocket came into existence because someone borrowed it. If the U.S. government paid off its debt, the money supply would vanish. The economy would freeze. So the debt must grow. Inflation must continue. Your savings must lose value. This is not a bug in the software. It is the operating system. For men, 3 centuries, 1 perfect prison. Paterson made it permanent. Rothschild made it global. Morgan made it infinite. And you're the battery powering it all. They rely on one thing: complexity. They rely on the fact that finance is boring, that the numbers are too big, that you will just accept that this is how the world works. But now you see the blueprint. 38 trillion isn't a number. It's a measure of their control. The system is designed to strip you of your assets slowly, invisibly, through the hidden tax of inflation and the direct tax of interest. You cannot vote your way out of this. You cannot work your way out of this by following their rules. The only way to win is to understand the game. If you want to know how to protect what is yours and how to position yourself outside of this blast radius, subscribe. We're going to take this machine apart piece by piece.